I think I know most folks on the screen, but if not, I'm James Cook. I'm the head teacher at Cawdor Primary School and ELC. And as Kirsty mentioned, today I'm going to be talking around about outdoor learning and the approach that we've been developing in Cawdor over the last few years. This is something that we shared at the area team meetings for learning and teaching last term. Before I begin, I must just say that I feel like a bit of a fraud coming and speaking about this because it's definitely not me that's the expert of outdoor learning within our school context. Our principal teacher, Julia Jarrett, if you do have any questions, I'll answer them as well as I can, but in great politician speak, I'll no doubt pass you on to her after that around about any of the nitty gritty as part of our approach to outdoors here in Cawdor. Kirsty also mentioned, we were inspected back in June 23, and outdoor learning was one of the opportunities that were identified in terms of practice worth sharing. So what I thought I would do today is just give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour around about the approach that we've been developing. And as Kirsty mentioned there as well, any questions that you have, happy to answer those towards the end. So thinking around about where it sits within our school improvement plan, within our medium-term improvement plan that has taken us through from 2021 through to the end of this academic session. So we're on year 3 of our medium-term improvement plan. There's 2 areas that we've looked at from outdoor learning, which it features. So sort of 4th bullet point down there on the right hand side, outdoor learning was a key area of development in itself, thinking around about the immediate outdoors that we've got within the school context, but also the amazing outdoor spaces that we've got within our local community on our doorstep as well. And thinking about that through both our opportunities to learn about and through the outdoor context. As well as that, we've looked at it through our approaches towards learning through play and inquiry, and where outdoors features within that as a space, as well as our wider opportunities for that as part of our direct instruction as well. So when I'm talking you through that this afternoon, I'll look at that through the lens of both of these contexts. This sort of display board of the pictures that you see and that was there from the initial slide was something that we used in terms of showcasing our outdoor learning journey during the inspection as part of our ongoing self-evaluation within outdoors. One of the things our principal teacher did initially around about the outdoors in terms of development was some self-evaluation with our kids, with the staff team and with parents in the wider community around about those physical spaces that we've got. So we're really fortunate in terms of the immediate outdoor space that we've got within the school grounds, and what the principal teacher were leading on there is being able to identify, what opportunities do we have currently within there, and what opportunities did we need to look at within the school context in terms of developing that. And really that was thinking around about the spaces that were developed. So initially what was supported was in each of the classes within the school, each class had a class zone that was developed by the kids and by the staff in terms of that physical space, and planning that class zone that could be used for regular opportunities for outdoor learning. We also, at that point, had connected with parents within the community, looked at opportunities for donations for different resources, trying to keep cost to a minimum within there, around about some of the resources, so things that we could use that could be upcycled. I'll talk a bit around about Love Outdoor Learning again towards the end, but we also worked with them as an organisation. Love Outdoor Learning is an outdoor learning organisation that's based in the Central Belt, but Carol does visits across Scotland. She'll do a free consultation with schools where she will, as long as a member of the senior management team can walk the school grounds with her, she'll go through and look at the opportunities that you've got from there and then set an action plan with you in terms of how you can develop those spaces. She's developed this guide here, the Upcycled Playground, and the school features features in that as one of the examples. What I really like about Carol's work is that she works with a range of different contexts. So if your playground is predominantly concrete, there's some great examples in there around about how that can be developed as a space. And if you're more fortunate like ourselves to have some great outdoor space, there's some other examples and contexts as well that can be there. So Carol does do some work that you can pay for, but that work there around about the school visits, they come free of charge. She tends to come to the Highlands a couple of times a year, so you can contact her and add her to your list. And she is keen to get out and about. She gets funding from Scottish Government in order to be able to support some of that work in terms of the outdoors from the grounds perspective. And as mentioned there, it's just some of the sort of emerging work that was happening within classroom zones. You can see a range of different palettes, those sorts of things that are there. As you know, in terms of the fire regulations, and we are managed by MEARS as a private contractor, so we come under a slightly increased level of scrutiny around about that fire management. We've had to make sure that all of the resources are suitably away from the school building. Any of those resources that we've got in terms of pallets are fixed to a fixed source, or fixed to a structure that can't be moved. And that's been some of the problem solving that the kids and the staff have had to be thinking around about in terms of the safety of developing those classroom zones. In terms of the themes for learning, one of the things that we've been thinking around about is that learning through the outdoors. So using the outdoors as a landscape in terms of learning, both from the context of the school grounds, but as mentioned as well, the local community. So we've been working with the local community in terms of using local community spaces, the woodland that is adjacent to Cawdor Castle, and working with the Cawdor estate and also our local wind farm in terms of the various spaces that we can use in terms of learning through outdoors as a space. One of the first things that we looked at as a school community, once we'd looked at our classroom zones, was then thinking about something that we could develop as a whole school approach. So we started with our approach towards loose parts play. The principal teacher led on some development within the school around about the benefits of loose parts play, and what that looked like in practice. You'll see there a couple of screen grabs that we've got. I'm happy to share some of these resources about some guidance that we've put together for families around about the benefits of loose parts play, where the learning takes place within loose parts play. And also one of our pupil leadership groups have put together a charter for loose parts play in terms of the types of behaviours that we'd expect to see expected, and also how that links to our values and the wellbeing indicators. Loose parts features as part of our weekly learning within the school context. Initially, that was done within individual classes. And then last year, we started to work across classes. So there was some vertical learning going on across year groups where there were weekly challenges that were set up across classes, where some of the older kids and younger kids were working together to develop some of that collaboration. This year, we've moved that to working within sort of stage teams with it again. So thinking around about sort of year groups that are closer towards one another and how they're linking that to the likes of their interdisciplinary learning across there. So we've committed to loose parts play each week within the timetable. This was something that the inspectors themselves got their trainers on and engaged in, which was really positive. And practitioners link that to our work within the meta skills. So we have a meta skill that we focus on each week as a school community, and that is one of the drivers that we use in terms of our approach towards loose parts play. In terms of storage and things for loose parts, that was a bit where in terms of logistics that we've looked at. We have had to invest in an outdoor storage shed, doing some fundraising within from the parent council, and also looking at some outdoor grants as well that we could get to ensure that we're compliant with the fire regulations within that. So previously our loose parts were stored outdoors and they were easily accessible at all points, but we have had to make some adjustments in light of the fire guidance. So they are in a large loose part storage shed now in terms of that access. And it does mean that we've got a sort of designated loose parts area that we're using on a weekly basis. Within the classroom zones, we've got a couple of smaller sheds as well that we've got, and those have some loose parts within there as well. So there's can be some bespoke loose parts learning that takes place within classroom zones, but our sort of larger loose parts area happens up on our tarmac. The other area is then around about learning about the outdoors. And so this is where, as a school community, we looked at our 3-year curriculum overview, and we looked at our opportunities for outdoor learning within those contexts. So within each of our contexts of learning, we look at where the opportunities are for outdoor learning within the responsibility of all areas, but also across the curriculum. Each week, each class has an opportunity to learn outdoors at least once a week, but in many of our classes, it's multiple times a week where they're learning outdoors. That is thinking around about how they can use that outdoor landscape in terms of enhancing their learning, thinking around about it within the likes of their science context, their social studies, but also how that links to some of the aspects that they do within literacy and numeracy as well. Initially, in terms of confidence, we linked in with a range of different resources. Again, the Live Outdoor Learning was a helpful organisation for us to initially engage with. What they have there is they've got a free professional learning opportunity that you can access. It's a email a day for a week is the sort of initial aspect of it. And what that does is that gives you some prompts and probes that you can look at within the classroom context. I've also got a really helpful book there that's been produced called Breaking Into the Playground, and that links it to the experiences and outcomes and some sort of possible catalysts that can be used if you do have staff that are lacking in confidence or perhaps a little bit reluctant around about the outdoor spaces, around about initially getting staff into the outdoor space before that learning becomes more naturalistic in terms of the day-to-day link to the various contexts of learning. Latterly, what we were doing towards the end of last session was then trying to map that out and trying to think what that would look like in terms of our whole school approach towards outdoor learning. For a number of things that we've tried to create here in Cawdor, we've tried to create one-page overviews that are able to be picked up quite easily by staff and then have underpinning links between them that are within our Google Drive. What you'll see in terms of our approach is that we've said that outdoor learning has these 3 things. So it's around about that opportunity to learn through the outdoors. So thinking about outdoors as a space for learning, learning about the outdoors. So thinking around about where the outdoors is almost that vehicle for learning that takes place, and also around about that context for learning for sustainability as well. So where does our learning link to the likes of the Sustainable Development Goals, and also one of our pupil leadership groups that focuses on sustainability as well. We've looked at it from where, so the majority of our outdoor learning takes place within our school grounds, but as mentioned, we also use our local environment as well. So very fortunate, as I mentioned, likes of the local woodland and local river and the farmland that's adjacent to the school as well. And then also thinking around about how do we utilise the opportunities for likes of residential and actually mapping that at primary 7 as an opportunity for learning, recognising all the skills and knowledge that's developed through that context of learning for our kids. In terms of our approach there, you can see we look at it where in all areas of the curriculum, staff are identifying those opportunities for outdoor learning. As part of our planning for IDL and our high quality assessment tasks, staff are identifying those opportunities for outdoor learning there. The loose parts play, that becomes, as I mentioned, a regular opportunity for all of our children, focusing on collaboration and communication. And we're using the meta skills in terms of driving that as a whole school approach. We use the organisers from Realising the Ambition because it connects to an approach towards inquiry-based learning in terms of how we've designed our spaces. You can see there in terms of the classroom zones, those are something that continues to be developed throughout the year. And our classes review that on a termly basis in terms of the space that they've got. Thinking around about the likes of food education, so learning about the outdoors. Food education's been a catalyst that we've used there. So thinking around about how we utilise those skills in terms of our growing within our garden areas and how we then use that as part of the food that we create within the classroom, linked contexts. We look at it from the lens of our experiences, so what that looks like in terms of the continuous provision for early learning and childcare in early primary, with that opportunity to access outdoors every single day, and also how that looks as children continue to move through the school. And then the final part around about the interactions is then where we have supported the development in terms of professional learning. So as part of our school improvement plan, particularly in the first 2 years of our 3-year overview, there were a range of different professional learning sessions that were led by our principal teacher, but also some of our other staff who have an interest in outdoors. And also linking with various organisations as well. So as well as Live Outdoor Learning, how we link in with the likes of Highland Outdoor and Woodland Learning as well, and the range of free professional learning that they provide within there as well. So, as mentioned, a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and I'm by no way means the expert, but doing as well as I can on Julia's behalf to be able to share our approach. But as mentioned, happy to take any questions or thoughts that anyone has. Thank you.
Thanks so much, James. That was very, very thorough. Actually, really inspiring. I'm sitting there thinking back to my first days when Milton of Leys opened, and had the envious task of having this completely unlandscaped school playground to try to develop. Really could have done with hearing this back then. Anybody got any questions they want to ask? I think we're probably small enough that we can do hands up, or if anybody wants to put it in the chat. Just while we're waiting, oh, sorry, Kirsty, I'll let you come in 2 seconds. I'm just going to ask James, from your point of view, any advice or tips around how to, I'm trying to think how to word this. It's around that kind of confidence level that you've mentioned around staff. It is one of the areas that staff sometimes feel quite uncomfortable, or maybe it is just confidence. Any kind of thoughts on how to help staff to overcome that kind of hesitancy or that reluctance or that, not sure if it's fear, maybe it is just confidence?
Yeah, I think so for us, a starting point was to think around about resources. So thinking about the sort of physicality of resources that were there, almost having like a backpack that was a grab and go thing that could be used in terms of the outdoor space. Um, uh, Investing in a couple of copies of that Breaking into the Playground book was helpful. So for those staff that were less confident, it got them, out of the classroom and then straight into that outdoor space in terms of, almost grab and go lessons, which is not the approach that we see now and not the approach that we were aspirational for at the beginning, but it was where we knew that we had to move them from a space where, everything was quite controlled indoors and then how that could happen outdoors. And then I think the third thing for us was around about how we could invest in the time for coaching and modelling. So thinking around about the expertise that we had within the school, how could I free up those teachers? If I jumped into a class at that point, how could I free up those teachers in order to be able to work alongside a teacher who was less confident, for example.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I like the idea of that kind of tangible, it's not a guidebook or a handbook, but just something that they can actually almost cling on to as a kind of starting point.
Yeah, and the
Um,
Live Outdoor Learning is great for that. It's got everything, and that's freely accessible in terms of some of the resources that she suggests to have in that, in that grab and go bag. Simple things like, having chalk, having whistles, having whiteboards, just those things that you can have within and be able to resource without any great expense, because a lot of it are things that hopefully we have within the school context anyway.
Brilliant. And I think, Kirsty, we'll put links. I think our plan is to upload eventually onto YouTube and put the links kind of alongside the actual
Yeah.
videos as well. So we'll get that from you, James. Kirsty, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to ask James, for head teacher looking at developing outdoor learning as part of improvement planning, there is lots and lots of guidance out there, and
Mhm.
particularly loose parts. If you put loose parts into a Google search, there's so much sitting there, loads and loads of useful toolkits. You've mentioned breaking into the playground, but is there any other guidance or professional reading resources you would recommend to head teachers in schools that would support outdoor learning as part of school improvement?
Yeah, in terms of the loose parts play, I would agree with you there, Kirsty. It can be quite a minefield in terms of what you're trying to engage in. The resources that are there in terms of Lego Foundation, they've got some really helpful resources that look at the skills for learning through play. It's not loose parts specific, but they are really helpful around about the ways in which that um, I suppose that clarity in terms of skills and why we do why we do what we do, and then Play Scotland in terms of their loose parts, but also around about their the resources that they've got about how you turn your playground into a learning space. So they've got some really good examples, similar to some of that Live Outdoor Learning work around about how do you take these concrete inner city playgrounds and how do you turn those into something low cost with community involvement and engagement that actually make that a space for learning. And there's a few links I'm happy to share them with you, and you can link them in.
Thanks so much, James. That was really helpful. And just an observation, just from your presentation, I really like how you have really considered the totality of the curriculum, using that cycle of curriculum coverage and building the outdoor learning experiences into that so it becomes progressive and not just a one-off by chance, let's head outside today. I think that's really strong, and particularly as well linking to the meta skills. Skills is something that comes up a lot in our inspections. How do you make that relevant? Well, using the outdoors is one way to really to bring
Yeah,
skills development to life. So thanks.
thank you.
Any other questions anybody wants to ask? Or, sorry, maybe questions, a bit of a kind of leading. Anybody want to share anything in relation to what we've talked about here? Oh, I hate having to fill this empty space.
I was going to say,
I'll
if you
ask.
think of anything later, pop it into the chat, and we can save up the questions and take them to James, and then put them into our learning and teaching tile and build it into the self-evaluation activity. So if you don't want to ask in front of everybody else, feel free to put it into the chat or to email either one of us or James directly, and we'll build it into the activities that we create.
I've just got one question. I'll just ask James, and then I think we're aiming to try and keep this quite nice and tight at 2 o'clock finish. But James, if we were to ask the pupils from the school about the kind of biggest impacts that outdoor learning has made to them, what would be their kind of headlines, do you think?
Space to think is something that comes back, so that way where the lack of inhibition that the outdoor can create in terms of that space. Um, as something else that our kids have talked around about is that sense of well-being that supports. So thinking around about it from the sense that even just being in that outdoor space, where that's as a place for learning, but also learning about the outdoors, and also I would say the global impact as well. So thinking around about where what we're trying to make as many of the connections with as possible is trying to think around about the connect that to the global goals, how we connect that to sustainability, and trying to make that relevant for kids in terms of that space. Where they wouldn't necessarily come at it from, I think, would be the attainment and achievement element of that aspect. That's where, as a staff, we're maybe thinking around about it from. So thinking about how we can, use that outdoor space to increase some of that attainment and achievement. And we make some correlations between that, but we'd be making sweeping statements if we said that was leading to our high levels of achievement.
Perfect. Thanks, James. We've got our first comment. Where are we? I'm so impressed with this approach. It really gives me an idea as to how we could do this as a whole school, and I would love to visit.
You are welcome. I will put you in touch with Julia. She will happily show you around.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, as I say, I think we're aiming to keep this nice and kind of sharp in terms of length. So I think a double thank you to James. Thank you for the content, but also for being our first speaker as well. So a huge thank you, James.
Just to get it out of the way, Robert, let's be honest.
The bar has been set reasonably high. So hopefully you found that useful. I'm going to pass back to Kirsty because I can't remember what's happening on Friday, but we've got our second one. Well, I know we're doing one, but I've forgotten the actual focus.
Yeah, it's not on Friday. Our next one is actually on the 29th of January. So we've got a bit of a gap, and then it's 29th of January, and you'll be hearing from Liz Doyle, who was the head teacher at Rum Primary School, really unique island context. I was lucky enough to support with that incredible inspection report. If you're on Education Scotland and read it, just like James, is another really positive one for our schools. So Liz will be talking about maximising learning and engagement in a unique island context, so really relevant to small rural schools where you kind of need to think out of the box a little. So James, massive thank you from us for today, and thanks everyone for joining our session today. Really appreciated you coming along, and if you've got any questions, please do just add them to the chat and we'll follow up on those.
And we'll get that uploaded as soon as possible. We're going to probably create a YouTube channel and we'll just upload the videos to that and we'll send the links out to that. So thanks everybody. Happy
Thanks,
snow
everyone.
day. Thanks.
Thanks, James.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant, James. Thank